You're watching BBC One Northern Ireland. The votes are in, counting is underway, and we're here with all the results now in Vote 07.
A very good afternoon to you and a warm welcome to Vote 07. Over the next 2 days, the shape of our new Assembly will emerge from yesterday's voting. At counting centres all over Northern Ireland, the ballot boxes are yielding up their secrets. The PR system grinds slowly, but the first results are expected within the next couple of hours. In less than 3 weeks' time, the government wants to see our freshly mandated politicians form the first truly inclusive power-sharing executive. Many hurdles may lie between here and there, but the first jump, of course, is to win the election. As ever, we'll be watching every step of the way. Here on BBC Northern Ireland's Vote 07, we've a battery of reporters fully charged at every one of 18 constituency counts. They'll bring us the drama, the winners and losers, the speeches, and we hope a few surprises. Here in studio, as the patterns begin to unfold, we'll hear the reaction from party representatives and political commentators who know the twists and turns of every ballot paper.
And we're not just getting reaction in the studio, I'm out and about today too. I'm actually on the top of Divis Tower right now. I'll be bringing you responses from a wide range of people live right here over the course of the next 2 days.
And here at our news desk, we'll be keeping you up to date with all the big election headlines, as well as what the key players are saying. You certainly won't miss what's happening. Join me about every half hour right throughout the day.
And this is the engine room where we make all of that happen. This marquee is where the staff are waiting for the calls, bring you those results before anyone else. And it also houses all the graphics, computer hardware to make sure that we are first with those results, and we'll make sure that they ping up onto your screen at home just as soon as we get them. The marquee is located in the backyard at Broadcasting House, very close to our studio. If I just make my way through now, you'll see the operation from a slightly different angle. Over the next 2 days, we're going to bring you the battle within unionism, the battle within nationalism, and of course we'll see how things shape up for that top spot between very possibly the DUP and Sinn Féin. Now, doing that, and indeed covering an election properly, is a pretty complex job. So that's where there are quite so many people involved. Once the results are in, this will be where it all happens. With the help of our graphics team, we'll show you all the results and those all-important trends. And working to track all the crucial transfers, Dr. Sidney Elliott from Queen's University, and providing the in-depth analysis, BBC Northern Ireland's political editor, Mark Devenport. Now, for the first time in a UK election, we're not just bringing you the results on your television, radio and online. We're also going to bring them to you on your personal mobile phone. All you need to do is text the word election to 81222 and you'll get updates on the winners and the state of the parties throughout.
We also want to hear what you think. You can text us at 81771. We'll reflect your thoughts on screen. And if you're a digital viewer on satellite or cable, you can press the red button on your remote to get an up-to-date overview at any time. If you're wedded to your computer screen today or manacled to it, you can call up the hottest results service at bbc.co.uk/NIrelandNews. So let's begin with a quick trawl around our reporters at the counting centres to see what the first indications might be. All 4 Belfast counts are taking place at the Nugent Hall. That's part of the King's Hall complex in South Belfast. Jim Fitzpatrick has been watching the ballot boxes opening there. Jim.
Noel, yes, 24 seats up for grabs here in Belfast. And overall, I assume the story today is going to be one perhaps of DUP gains at the expense of the Ulster Unionist Party. Specifically across Belfast, the constituencies where that may happen would be South Belfast, where the DUP are hoping to gain. However, while it's rumoured that Esmond Birney there is in trouble, some are saying that Bob Stoker, another Ulster Unionist candidate, could be in with a shout. Also in South Belfast, we'll be looking out to see how the Alliance candidate Anna Lowe polls. A lot of predictions there that she could take a seat. However, early indications today are that she maybe isn't making an impact, which would mean that the SDLP's 2 seats in that constituency are safe. East Belfast, another constituency the DUP will be hoping to make gains. Alliance are apparently polling very well there. That's their deputy leader, Naomi Long, doing well there. North Belfast, again, another constituency where the DUP would hope to make a gain against the Ulster Unionists. West Belfast is the only constituency where the DUP might lose out. There's some pressure there on Diane Dodd's seat. The Sinn Féin are working very hard to take 5 seats, and the question will be whether they take that off Diane Dodd's or Alex Atwood of the SDLP.
OK, Jim, thank you very much indeed. Now, one of the most interesting count centres this time is a new venue when it comes to Assembly elections, Ballymena's Seven Towers Leisure Centre. Both the North Antrim and Mid-Ulster counts are taking place there. That means that Ian Paisley and Martin McGuinness will perhaps have a chance to chat about their potential double act as First and Deputy First Ministers. Rosie Billingham, any sign of either of them yet?
Well, yes, as you say, it's all symbolism here. Martin McGuinness is expected to arrive within the hour and Ian Paisley at around 2 o'clock. Now, they're obviously sharing this count centre, but the question is, will they be sharing power come March the 26th? Looking at the Mid-Ulster count, last time round it was 4 nationalist seats, 2 unionist. There's no talk of change in that regard this time round. There is talk of some possible change when it comes to North Antrim, though. That's the talk on the floor here. The question is, can the UKU wildcard candidate profit from those dissenting DUP councillors on Ballymena Council? Well, the prediction was he might, but the answer here on the floor, it's just talk, is that no, he hasn't. The DUP are still pushing for that 4th seat. That could be at the expense of the SDLP. The SDLP looking worried. Ulster Unionists aren't polling too well, though. They're probably safe. When it comes to Sinn Féin, they say they've come up against very little opposition from the independent Republican campaigning on an anti-policing ticket. So they're looking very confident and talking at getting in on the first count. So you could have a very bizarre situation where, because of very clever vote management on the part of the DUP, Sinn Féin could actually be vying with the DUP leader to top the poll here in Ballymena. Unlikely, but that's the talk here on the floor.
OK, Lisburn Leisureplex is another of the new count centres. The Lagan Valley and South Down counts are taking place there. Martin Cassidy, some tough battles ahead?
Yes, we're in for a marathon count here in South Down. It is, of course, one of the biggest constituencies. 16 candidates all vying for just 6 seats. Now, since early morning, they've been trawling through 95 boxes of votes. We still haven't actually started to count. They're still trying to straighten them out. It could be 2:30 before the count itself actually gets underway. The early interest centres on the Ulster Unionist Party. Dermot Nesbitt's old seat. A former young farmer president, John McAllister, is carrying a heavy weight of responsibility for the Ulster Unionists. And already there's a few concerns on the Ulster Unionist part as to whether he can hold that seat. DUP, well, of course, Jim Wells is the big figure in this constituency for the DUP, and they're hoping that William Burns might be able to squeeze the Ulster Unionists out. On the nationalist side, well, the SDLP would dearly love to take a seat back from Sinn Féin, but both parties claim that they are polling well. We'll see how it goes, 2:30 before we know the valid vote, and the quota, the first result, will be sometime later this afternoon.
OK, well, welcome to the top of a very blowy and windy Divis Tower in the heart of West Belfast. Just take a look here at the views over to the west of the city, moving round to the north. This was, of course, one of the last army watchtowers to recently be dismantled. Now I'm here for the first hit today. I'll be travelling around Belfast today, and joining me up here, they've got a head for heights today, 2 first-time voters. Laura Devenny, why did you vote this time, apart from the reason that you can?
I suppose I just turned 18 in September, and I've lived in Northern Ireland all my life, and I think it's a very beautiful country, and we no longer need to be segregated. And our generation has often been said that, you know, we're going to make poverty history and do all this, and I think that the Northern Ireland teens have to make the difference in Northern Ireland for our future and not to live in the past as some of the politicians do.
And Chris Torbett, you're also here today. Why did you feel it was important to vote?
I feel that it's important that we have a locally appointed government that we can hold accountable in this country. I mean, we're being directly ruled from Britain at the minute, and there are ministers there who have not lived here and have not lived the way that we live. They don't understand the way that we live, and I think that it's important that we have people who came from this country that know how we work, and it's important that they make the decisions for us.
How was your first experience of voting?
I found it to be quite an anticlimax. I mean, when I got there it was just a sheet of paper, but it's ironic because of the power that this sheet of paper holds. You know, it's a very important sheet of paper that we are making a decision with.
And Laura, was there much chat in the common rooms at school and things like that about in the run-up to voting among your contemporaries?
There was. I think we had politicians last week come up to our school and sort of, brought up the hype of the voting. Everybody who was 18 was sort of very excited about it. Who are you going to vote for? What are you going to do? And will it make a difference? And I think that was the big thing for the new voters this year. Are we going to make the difference to Northern Ireland with power sharing and everything that's coming through?
Well, we'll find out soon. The results are coming in very shortly. But for now, from the top of Divis Tower in the heart of West Belfast, it's back to the studio.
Sarah, thank you. Well, Banbridge is hosting Upper Ban and Urian Armagh, and in the latter case in particular, very much a compelling contest in the making. Davy Hyland's no longer standing for Sinn Féin, and Paul Berry no longer in the DUP fold, so will either be able to hold onto their seat. Conor McCauley will tell us. Conor.
Well, Noel, it's very early days yet, but in terms of turnout, I can tell you it's very high. Someone I know here told me it was something in the region of around about 90%. Now, that might be a little bit on the optimistic side, but there's a lot of attention on how Davy Hyland, as you say, is doing. That ex-Sinn Féin MLA, deselected by the party, now standing as an independent. Not only was he wondering how he's doing, the SDLP is also wondering how he's doing, because they were, I think, hoping that if he drew away enough of the old core Sinn Féin vote, that might allow them to get Sharon Hoy in and get a second seat. But I can tell you, I just spoke to Davy Hyland about 15-20 minutes ago. He's saying that he's conceding that he's not going to win a seat, and he says that he doesn't think that his candidacy is going to affect the outcome in terms of the national seat balance here. That would leave it 3 seats to Sinn Féin and 1 to the SDLP. Just moving over to the Paul Berry story. Paul Berry standing as an independent. He's up against a fairly strong candidate, a high-profile candidate here, William Irwin of the DUP, the Mayor of Armagh. And talking to DUP sources, they're telling me that William Irwin is doing fairly well. They're fairly confident of holding that seat. They say that in some of the unionist boxes that they've opened, the UUP candidate Danny Kennedy and William Irwin have been kind of neck and neck. Paul Berry has been trailing far behind. The other count here, Upper Ban, that's going to be more of a battle within unionism. No David Trimble this time. He was a big vote getter for the UUP, and the UUP may be under a little bit of pressure here. They're up against a fairly strong DUP ticket.
Conor, thank you. Now, Strangford and North Down have substantial unionist majorities. North Down, of course, the home base of Robert McCartney of the UK Unionists. It's one of 6 seats where he's standing this time in person. Yvette Shapiro is in Newton Ards, where those counts are taking place. Yvette.
Good afternoon, Noel. And if Bob McCartney, you would think, would hold a seat anywhere, surely it would be in his homeland, his heartland of North Down. But that isn't certain. Observers of the count are saying that he's in real trouble. They're saying that even in his local polling station in Cultraw, that Alliance topped the poll there. And they're saying that his vote in Bangor has significantly weakened. So perhaps Bob McCartney may lose his seat. Indeed, where might it go? Well, one man who believes, and all of the other observers believe, who will be here at the end in the fight for the final seat is Brian Wilson of the Green Party. He's polled extremely strongly in Bangor West and in Ballyholme in Bangor there, and he believes he's doing very well, and so do all of the other observers. He's running Stephen Farry of the Alliance Party very hard. Stephen Farry is hoping to keep the seat that was held by the outgoing MLA, Eileen Bell, but it's by no means certain, and it does look like there could be quite a fight between Farry and Wilson. The DUP, as in many other areas we're hearing, have had a very good vote management strategy. Indeed, one of their opponents, Marion Smith of the Ulster Unionist Party, told us a short while ago that the vote management of the DUP was fabulous here in North Down. Alex Easton, it's looking, may actually have topped the poll here. Some suggestions that he might exceed the quota. So, and Peter Weir is also very well known locally. He's held his seat the last time, and it looks as if he may come through again. Brian Rowan, our former colleague, the former security correspondent of the BBC, has polled extremely well in Hollywood, one of the local stations there. He was ahead. Doesn't look as if there are very many votes for him in and around the Bangor area, but he's been strong in Hollywood, which is his home territory. So we'll have to wait and see how he shapes up. Let's just look across to the Ards Peninsula and to Strangford. Again, the big story there, DUP vote management. We spoke to Iris Robinson a short time ago. She basically told us that people who are supporters of the DUP did what they were told. She needed her vote to be reduced a little so that her running mates could come up, and it looks as if that has happened. She believes that they could take a 4th seat. It's certainly, say other observers, doable. And the other interesting story in Strangford is the fight that's shaping up between the SDLP and the Alliance Party. Kieran McCarthy, veteran Alliance politician, has always just squeezed in the last elections. However, Joe Boyle, the chippy from Portaferry, says he's had an extremely strong vote there, and he's picking up votes from all over the place. So he's hoping that he could run Kieran McCarthy out of town in this election.
Yvette, thank you. All these little stories and dramas emerging already. We'll be keeping an eye on all of them, a microscopically close eye on them. East Antrim and South Antrim are both underway in the counting on the shores of Lough Neagh at the Antrim Forum. The Alliance leader David Ford squeaked home to take the 6th seat in South Antrim last time round. This time he's up against one of Sinn Féin's best-known figures, Mitchell McLaughlin. Julian O'Neill, the ballot boxes opened 3 hours ago. Any word as to when you might get the first results?
Few hours yet, probably, Noel, but most people are in and out of this constituency, of course, on their holidays. It's where you'll find the international airport. And as you say, could it be that a household name of local politics is sent packing after 1 or 2 days counting? The campaign really has been summed up as a contest for the 6th seat between David Ford, the Alliance Party leader, an outgoing MLA here, and the General Secretary of Sinn Féin, Mitchell McLaughlin, a blow-in, a high-profile one at that, from Foyle, who's standing here for the first time, and indeed Sinn Féin are hoping that he will bring them their first ever seat in South Antrim. But I have to say the picture emerging here this morning is that both could be elected at the expense of the SDLP. Certainly Sinn Féin, the DUP and the Alliance Party all telling me that Mitchell McLaughlin has polled very well. The loser then may be the outgoing MLA from the SDLP, Thomas Burns, whose running mate Noreen McClelland. They have been at loggerheads, open warfare here. That's no secret, and that hasn't gone down well with the voters. So it could be that the SDLP are the losers in this constituency. Aside from that, we've got a truly heavyweight unionist contest between William McRae of the DUP and David Burnside of the Ulster Unionists, old foes, of course, from Westminster campaigns here. Be interesting to see who tops the poll in that respect. The money here is on William McRae. The DUP aiming for 3 seats. They had 2 last time. That may be stretching it a bit by all accounts here. Over in East Antrim, of course, again, predominantly a unionist constituency. Not much change expected, and they've just announced what the turnout's been, 53.4%. That then, the picture from South and East Antrim.
Julian, thank you. Over in the west, Fermanagh and South Tyrone and West Tyrone are the election battlegrounds. The counts for these constituencies are well underway in Omagh, where health, of course, is a big issue. We'll be watching to see if the independent candidate, Dr. Kieran Deeney, can hold on to the seat he took from the SDLP in 2003. Our man Julian Fowler is there.
Well, Noel, in Fermanagh, South Tyrone, it consistently returns 3 nationalists and 3 unionists, and 5 of the outgoing MLAs will be hoping to regain their seats. They include Sinn Féin's Michelle Gildenew and the SDLP's Tommy Gallagher. But who will join them? Well, Sinn Féin's Jerry McHugh will be hoping to regain the seat he lost last time round to party colleague Thomas O'Reilly. He's not standing this time. But Jerry McHugh could lose out again to former IRA prisoner and officer commanding of the Mays, Sean Lynch. I'm told that the Sinn Féin vote has held up well across the constituency, and that the independent Republican Jerry McHugh, who held a quite high-profile campaign, has not made a significant impact. There shouldn't be any upsets on the unionist battlefield. Fermanagh South Tyrone, traditionally an Ulster unionist stronghold. That was, of course, until Arlene Foster defected to the DUP. I'm told Ulster unionists are polling well in Fermanagh. The DUP are probably doing better in South Tyrone. But Arlene Foster, Lord Maurice Morrow, the former Social Development Minister, and the Ulster Unionist Agriculture spokesman Tom Elliott should all get their seats back.
Julian, thank you very much indeed. Now, 626 polling stations, 1,550 ballot boxes, 250 candidates, 108 seats, 8 counting centres. There's truth, damn truth and statistics. And Mark's in charge of them all.
Yes, well, hopefully we'll have a bit more truth than speculation and no dishonesty, of course. But we don't have any results in yet, but it is interesting just at this stage to remind ourselves, I think, what the state of play was in 2003 during the last Assembly election. So we've got some quite nice pictures to show you here. That's Parliament buildings. If we fly in on our graphics to the chamber itself, 2003 election results. This is how it looked then, if you remember. We had 30 members returned for the DUP. The Ulster Unionists had 27. There they are in blue. The PUP 1 and 1 UK Unionist. And if we spin round to the other side of the chamber, there are Sinn Féin members totalling 24, 18 for the SDLP. And we've got some alliance members in the middle, 6 of them, and 1 independent. That, of course, was Kieran Deeney. So that's how it looked at the end of play 2003. But, of course, there were some changes, and we can show you those changes now. The comparisons that we do throughout the election programmes, of course, will be on the final result in 2003. But it is interesting just to remind ourselves what happened after the MLAs were returned in 2003. There were a few changes. There were 3 Ulster Unionists who flipped to the DUP, and there they are: Jeffrey Donaldson, Nora Beer and Arlene Foster. 1 DUP member became an independent. That was Paul Berry, of course, in Newry and Armagh, and the question is, will he hold on to that seat as an independent? On the other side of the House, 2 Sinn Féin MLAs became independents: Davy Hyland in Newry and Armagh, and he's trying to hold on to that seat as an independent, and the other was Geraldine Dugan, who's not standing. So those are the changes on 2003, although, as I say, the comparisons that we make will be on the initial results. But let's hear from Mark Devenport and Sydney Elliott, who'll be doing the number crunching with me over the next day and a half. Just in terms of what we've heard so far in Noel's conversations with our correspondents in the various counts, anything particularly grab your attention? Any huge surprises, Mark, first of all?
It's certainly sort of interesting, some of what Yvette was saying about the vote management of the DUP. This is something that they've been trying to get right for some time, but historically it was always felt that Sinn Féin did it rather better than any of the Unionists, and that the Unionists tended to bring in their big names with very high numbers, which is okay for your ego, but in a single transferable vote election does not necessarily help your running mates, where you need to divide up the votes evenly. Now, the DUP have been saying in advance of this that they are going to try to manage their vote better, to bring in more seats at the end of it. So if they are succeeding in doing that and translating the kind of big figures that they were drawing in the last Westminster election, then that will be interesting. And whilst that's a technical point, it goes to, if you like, the political strategic point, which is that a lot of commentators will be looking to see how far is the DUP blocking the Assembly's strength, and does that embolden Messrs Paisley and Robinson in terms of any ability that they feel they now have to do a deal?
Yeah, and clearly there will be a number of key constituencies where the DUP will be trying to push its tally up from 2 to 3, from 3 to 4. The same thing for Sinn Féin in a number of constituencies. It's less of an issue, of course, for the SDLP and the Ulster Unionists.
Well, the SDLP have a couple of targets. For instance, in Strangford, you heard there talk of Joe Boyle, and they're hoping that they'll get a nationalist toehold in Strangford. It might be at the expense of the Alliance's Kieran McCarthy. They also hope that a sort of pincer motion, if you like, in Newry and Armagh, which would involve Davy Hyland undercutting the Sinn Féin vote from, if you like, the hardline side, and Sharon Hockey coming in, if you like, from the softer side, would give them back a second seat, which they lost. So SDLP have a couple of targets. We're not really talking about targets, we're just looking about an attempt, I think, to hold your own.
There are a lot of personalities here, and hopefully we'll get a real flavour of that over the course of this programme and what we do tomorrow as well. Sydney, one name that was mentioned there, and it'll be fascinating to see how he does, is Brian Wilson, because there is a possibility we could have our first Green MLA.
Very possibly. Long record in local government in North Down area, and with his fingertips in terms of politics, he knows what's happening on the area, and he could well take that seat. He is Green. He was Alliance, and it was a loss to Alliance in that area. So in a sense, it would be a big triumph for Green to win a seat in North Down.
Yeah, OK. Well, it's fascinating to look at that, and so many other issues as well, and so many other personalities. And we'll come back to all of that. But for now, thank you both very much indeed. Noel.
OK, let's go straight back to Kieran Turish up in the northwest. He has some news for us. Kieran?
Hello, Noel. Well, the count here at the Templemore Sports Complex is progressing very well, no problem so far. We are, of course, counting Foyle and East Londonderry. Now, the SDLP party sources tell me that Mark Durkan, the leader, is polling very strongly, and he should be in comfortably alongside 2 colleagues. Sinn Féin would be hoping to retain the 2 seats that they have, and William Hay of the DUP seems to be outpolling his UUP challenger by 2 to 1, so a strong performance from William Hay. things to look out for here in Foyle, of course, would be the performance of Peggy O'Hara, the mother of the dead hunger striker Patsy O'Hara. She's running as an independent Republican, and her colleagues have been telling me that she's been doing quite well. Probably not enough to take a seat, but she could put paid to Sinn Féin's aspirations to take a third seat from the SDLP. Now, in East Londonderry, Gregory Campbell, of course, is the MP. He'll be returned, no problem at all, probably alongside his party colleague George Robinson. And for the UUP, we should have 2 returned there as well. And completing the numbers should be 1 for the SDLP and 1 for Sinn Féin. Again, another caveat to add, we'll need to be looking out for the performance of Leslie Cupid. Of course, he fell out with the DUP last month over party policy. He fundamentally disagrees with the policy of sharing power with Sinn Féin, so 1 to look out for there. But I think the general consensus that seems to be emerging at the moment, both in East Londonderry and in Foyle, is that it could be a case of as you were.
OK, Kieran, thank you very much indeed. Well, it's time to introduce my studio guests this morning, in no particular order. Alex Kane, Ulster Unionist commentator, shall we call you? That'll do. Brian Feeney, former SDLP politician and columnist and observer. Seamus Close is just retired, really, as a lifetime of alliance politics. And Jim Allister, who, of course, is the DUP MEP. You're all very welcome to the programme. Alex Kane, I was interested and a little disappointed to hear that young fellow on top of Divis Tower saying that he'd find voting an anticlimax, I think was the word he said, because I still find every time I go in to vote, there's a strange mystical power comes over you. You realise that you actually do have some power in this world we live in. Do you feel that it's an important and mystical experience?
I think it's changed. It's a generational thing. I mean, I first voted in 1974, and it was a very exciting time to be voting because the whole Sunningdale agreement was up for grabs. The SDLP was making progress. There was genuine excitement. This whole election, it hasn't been exactly one of jaw-dropping excitement at any stage. I think that's because, in some senses, there's no real choice. The parties are all basically on the same ground, singing from the same hymn sheet. And I think when you get that sort of election campaign and that sort of politics, it is dull. And for someone who's voting for the first time, it's not going to be particularly memorable.
Are you cynical about the experience of voting, Brian?
No, I think it's very important. I think more should be done, in fact, to try to persuade people to vote. Wouldn't go so far as to make it compulsory, as it is in Australia, where you can be fined. But I think people, certainly young people, perhaps should be taught how to vote, so that the first time they walk into a polling booth, they don't know where to go, they don't know what the box is.
Part of civic education.
Yeah, and as you say, though, the importance of the fact you can actually make a difference. I mean, sometimes elections are won, certainly in PR, on half a dozen votes, 10 votes, can make a big difference in transfers.
What was it like for you, Seamus?
Well, I would
Did the earth move?
Yeah, I would like to pick up on the mystical powers. I totally agree with that, because I fought 20 elections, and if I were to believe everything that the constituents told me, I would have topped the poll on every single one of them. But there is this mystical power that must grab the hands of the voters when they go into the polling booth and they vote for somebody else. So that would be my experience of that mystical power. It is alive and kicking, if I can put it that way.
But the other thing that struck me, just as I was marking my 1, 2, 3s, etc., was that in that booth, you suddenly do have some kind of relationship with these people, whoever they are. I mean, if you give whoever you give your 1, your 2, your 3, your 4 to, there is some kind of relationship there.
Well, yes, there's a sense of ownership. I think there's a sense of ownership, because what you're doing is exercising a franchise and saying, look, I prefer Joe to Sally, or vice versa, and so you go down the ticket. I would agree with Brian. I think there's a lot more education required at school level to get the young people more interested in voting and realising that it is a franchise that was hard fought for and hard earned, and that they, particularly the young people, hold the future in their hands. And if we're going to continue with the low turnouts, one of the turnouts are 53%. I mean, that's 47% of the people have decided they're not interested. I think that's a shame. And we need to do, all of us need to do more to encourage people to get out and exercise their vote.
We'll have a look, Seamus, just before we come to Jim, at the Lisburn count, where you would have spent many an hour looking at the growing or shrinking piles of votes. And it'll be some hours yet before we get any results. But there's the counters feverishly at their work, emptying the boxes, all 1,550 of them, not there, of course, and piling up the votes. Jim Allister, I know that as an MEP, of course, you have a slightly different perspective on all this. I know that you feel we don't, in the media, and let's not start bashing BBC this early in the programme, but the media in general don't show people enough about what you believe the importance of European elections.
Well, I'm glad that the BBC is feeling sensitive about that, but rather
I just thought I'd get my retaliation in
rather
first.
than feeling sensitive about it, I'd like to see them do something about it. But on the point of voting, of course voting is important because, democracy does not come cheaply. It did not come cheaply in the history of this nation. And it is something to be valued. Yesterday I was working throughout the day in West Belfast, and I took a 95-year-old gentleman yesterday morning to vote. He could hardly put one foot past the other, but he was determined that he was going to vote. And when I contrast that with the flippant and sometimes careless attitude of many of a younger age, then it does bring home to you.
But it is the prerogative of youth.
Of course, it's a prerogative of us all, whether or not to vote. But one point I do want to make out of that, if you don't vote, then it really does undermine your right to subsequently complain and to moan about what you get or don't get. So, this is the chance and the opportunity for all the electorate to have their say, and they should take it. And the more flourishing democracy we will have as a result, if people take that
Someone once said,
chance.
if you don't vote, you can't whine. More in a moment, gentlemen. Let's go to Donna and see what's happening in the big picture.
Well, Noel, as you know, counting has been underway since this morning. There are no results as yet, but we do have a official turnout figure from some of the constituencies. In North Belfast, almost 61% of the electorate turned out, while the figure in Lagan Valley was similar at 60%. There are 8 count centres for the 18 constituencies across Northern Ireland. The DUP's Sammy Wilson, who's standing in East Antrim, was in buoyant mood when he spoke at his count in Antrim.
Our vote has held up from the last Westminster election, which is pleasing because, so many people were predicting that we were in trouble because of the controversy about going into an executive or not going into an executive, etc. I never detected it around the doors, and I think that those who were hoping that there would be a collapse in the DUP vote are certainly not going to find any solace in that view as far as East Antrim is concerned. And people like Bob McCartney, who had been trumpeting that the DUP were in tatters, etc., I think it's going to be very, very disappointed from what we have seen so far.
Sammy Wilson of the DUP, and don't forget you can keep up to date using CFAX page 190 and on BBC News Online. The address is bbc.co.uk/N Ireland News. Lots more to come. I'll be back with you on the half hour with lots more.
Yeah, so let's hear what you think about the experience of voting. You can, of course, text us on 81771. Right, let's go to the Nugent Hall up at the King's Hall. Jim Fitzpatrick is observing the Belfast counts there. Jim.
Noel, thank you. And with me is the North Belfast candidate and indeed MP for the area, Nigel Dodds. Nigel, you're very welcome. I just want to bring you a few possible suggestions of where the vote is going at the moment, not in North Belfast but in South Belfast, because it impacts on how things are going across Belfast in general. And these are early tallies, so like everything else, it comes with a very big health warning at the moment. But we're looking at the DUP vote and where it's going across Belfast. South Belfast, it's doing well, but almost too well in the sense that Jimmy Spratt has possibly topped the poll there, but it's taken too many votes. The votes maybe haven't been managed, and the other DUP candidate, Christopher Stalford, is a bit too far behind. This means that when the things finally shake down, if these tallies prove to be correct, that the DUP may remain just with one seat there. The Ulster Unionists could easily lose a seat on the initial tallies. Michael McGimpsey looks like he's safe, the other two candidates don't. But what it does look like is that the Alliance candidate, Anna Lowe, is polling very strongly. So we could have the SDLP both returned there, that is Carmel Hanna and Alistair MacDonald. Anna Lowe from the Alliance would be the new candidate. Alex Maskey from Sinn Féin could well be safe. The DUP with one and the Ulster Unionists losing one. So Nigel Dodds, that suggests that your vote's doing well, but maybe your vote management isn't doing so well. What's it like in North Belfast?
Well, in North Belfast, we have polled extremely strongly once again, for which we're very grateful to the electorate in North Belfast for that vote of confidence. We have tried to manage the vote very, very strictly this time in terms of giving the Greater Shankle to William Humphrey, Greater Ballysillan to Nelson, and the rest to me. We'll wait and see whether it has worked out that way. I think in the Unionist electorate, as opposed to the Nationalist electorate, there's less discipline when it comes to vote management. And we're seeing that in South Belfast and other areas, but we'll continue to work at it. because I think people realise there's no point one candidate having a massive vote if you don't translate that into seats.
And when it comes to vote management, of course, Sinn Féin are seen perhaps as the masters of it. Look at West Belfast, where they're trying to get 5 seats. Some people say it's almost an impossibility to do it, but they've done it at a council level. And your wife, Diane, is vulnerable there if they manage that. What's it look like at this stage?
Well, Diane, it looks like, has polled overwhelmingly in the unionist community over her Ulster unionist rival. I mean, it's overwhelmingly in her favour. The key question, as you rightly point out, is how the Sinn Féin have managed their vote. It's a big ask, but they came very near to doing it the last time. There was only 85 votes in it last time. So it's very, very close there, and a lot will depend on turnout. The unionist electorate do have a quota there, but they need to turn out to vote. And we have yet to see whether or not there's a greater turnout on the national side compared to the unionist side, but it's going to go down to the wire as it did last time, and I think it's going to be very, very interesting.
And overall, would you like to see, do you expect to see DUP gains in Belfast?
We would be hoping for DUP gains in Belfast. We have clearly an eye on an extra seat in East Belfast. We would hope to translate the vote in South Belfast into an extra seat. And we have worked very hard in North Belfast as well, although it's a longer shot in terms of adding our representation there. But we'll wait and see. I think we have polled very, very strongly, and what's very clear is that the attempt by Robert McCartney to come in and make Sinn Féin the biggest party has failed miserably. He's been annihilated, and the unionist electorate in Belfast have made it very clear that they put their trust in the DUP.
Nigel Dawes, many thanks. And now let's go to Chris Buckler, who's in Lisburn.
And the Lagan Valley turnout seems to be 60%. It's a battle for unionism here. Back in 2003, of course, Jeffrey Donaldson was a member of the Ulster Unionist Party. Since then, he's moved to the DUP. He's hoping to take his vote with him. So where does that leave the Ulster Unionist Party? With me is Basil McRae, a candidate here, and you're very hopeful to get in, but some of your colleagues maybe not doing so well.
Well, it's too early to say yet, to be quite honest. We always knew it was going to be a challenging fight for the last seat. In fact, for number 5 as well. So it's all to play for, fingers crossed, and we're just hanging on in there.
The DUP already talking about potentially having 4 seats here in Lagan Valley. They believe that's an option because their vote management has been just so strong. Is that what you're seeing on the ground?
Well, the bit where I've been, actually, we thought we've gone head-to-head with them, but of course I can't speak for the whole constituency because we also had vote management going. At the end of the day, we'll only know this, sometime in about 12 hours from now. It's going to be very, very close for the last seat.
It's going to be close for the last 2 seats we're hearing as well. Talking to some people who've been down there, it's really the Alliance Party, Sinn Féin, the Ulster Unionists, the DUP, all fighting out for those final 2 seats. Lagan Valley could change quite a bit here.
Yes, it's absolutely amazing. I mean, I don't think the general public realise just how few votes it takes to swing one way or the other. I mean, you can do it in terms of 5 votes make the difference, which if ever there was an incentive for people to go out and vote, that's it. You will see, I mean, at the moment we're doing through the glory stakes, who's going to be topping the poll and whatever, but the real battle comes in the last few seats, and it turns on just a few votes.
I talked there about a battle for unionism. Certainly from what we're saying at this early stage in the poll, the DUP seem to be winning that here in what used to be an Ulster Unionist constituency. Where has your campaign gone wrong?
Well, I don't accept that our campaign has gone wrong. What I do think is it takes a while to change the juggernaut. We're quite convinced that bread and butter issues are what people are talking about. That's what they want to see resolved. Now, it may not yet have filtered through to the voting pattern, we don't know yet, but it will come. There's only one way forward for this country, and it's when we start tackling issues like water tax, education, health and all the rest of it, and we will just have to wait and see how it turns out down below.
There's been plenty of talk about potentially the Ulster Unionist Party needing to bring new people in, maybe bringing women in as well. Only one woman standing across these constituencies. You're described as a new face on your posters. Do we need newer faces, younger faces, female faces?
Getting women into politics is a challenge for every Western democracy apart from Scandinavia. And there's a real issue in there about childcare and how you get people able to actually come and do that. So we're very, very open to new faces, particularly women. We want to come back in, and we are certainly looking at the stage of rebuilding for the future, and we are going forward confidently.
Basil McRae, thank you very much indeed. This is proving to be a very competitive constituency. I was just talking to the Green Party candidate. He says he's got no chance, but he says down there he feels like a sheep amongst foxes. It's certainly going to be a battle here.
Excellent, Chris. Thank you very much indeed. Let's return to my panel. Jim Allister, a couple of months ago I might have introduced you as a DUP dissident. I'm not sure that's quite the case anymore. I mean, the DUP seem to be doing well. They could come out with 35 seats to this. Does this show that Ian Paisley's strategy has been right and that he should go into government on the 26th?
No, the DUP manifesto was very clear that what we were seeking was a mandate to require total, irreversible, upfront delivery from Sinn Féin, and that we weren't going to be bullied or bounced or bought by government pressure to depart from that. There was a party in this election which said to the Unionist people, let's go into government on the 26th of March. Let's not bother anymore with any conditions. Let's not require any delivery. Let's just jump back into government with Sinn Féin untested. That was the Ulster Unionist Party. We're beginning to see what the answer for them was. That's not the mood of unionism.
Okay, but
the
will
mood of
something
unionism
happen
is
on the
that Sinn
26th
Féin
of March?
must be tested and tested to the hilt.
Will something happen on the 26th of March? Will some fudge be arrived at that will give a pledge to go into office from all the parties concerned?
The sun will rise and the sun will set on the 26th of March, and I expect it will do the same on the 27th of March. This is not about a calendar. It's about conditions. And it seems to me Sinn Féin don't want into government on the 26th of March because they have been the foot draggers. They have dragged their feet since St Andrews. They delayed their Ardèche as long as possible. When it came along, they made it totally conditional upon being in government before they'd support the police. Then it's only some policing, this phony distinction about civic policing. We've had MPs, we've had an MP of their sense who wouldn't advise people to report fines of arms. You know, Sinn Féin don't seem to want into government. They seem to want to drag their feet.
Let's ask our commentators. What do you think is going to happen on the 26th of March, Brian?
I think there will be a deal on the 26th of March. It may not be the full deal. I mean, some DUP people are saying privately that there'll be a deal, but it won't be what they call the full deal. But I'm convinced there will be, because the alternative is that Tony Blair goes out in, say, 7th or 10th of May after 10 years. And he doesn't have a legacy in North of Ireland to point to. He's not going to let that happen. And if it were to happen...
Although hasn't Northern Ireland really dropped down the agenda now? I mean, Iraq is going to decide what Tony Blair's legacy is, not Northern Ireland.
It is. But he has no achievement without the North of Ireland. I mean, he's got a meeting on Friday about the results of this election. And if there isn't any kind of an outcome, the people who are responsible for that are going to be hurt. And Ian Paisley is going to have to explain why the only institution that unionists negotiated, an assembly, isn't there, and why the Irish government has been invited in to play a bigger role in Northern Ireland's affairs.
The UUP, Alex Kane, has been going on about normal politics and, as Jim says, very keen to get into government on the 26th of March. But the polls are telling a story, aren't they?
Actually, I think the polls are telling a story, and I agree with Brian on this. I think there will be a deal, because had Bob McCartney and his various clones and hangers-on actually made some sort of impact at the polls, I think that might have acted as a sort of safeguard. You know, it would have made the DUP think twice. It looks like they're coming in with no opposition at all, that they're going to get 35, 36 members. I think there's no doubt either that the electorate who voted yesterday voted for a government. They voted for the deal to be nailed down.
Yes, but not on the 26th of March.
Oh, I think it will be. I think Brian's right. I think there will be a fudge. I think that the fudge has already been, cooked and wrapped, and it's just waiting to be pushed into the front line. And the credibility period, the testing period, whatever you like, it'll be sort of concertinaed in. It'll be a matter of weeks rather than months.
So just to make this absolutely clear for people, you think there will be some kind of deal made. It won't be full power-sharing executive government on the 26th. It'll be a promise to do it some very
I think
quick
they will
date
find
after that.
a form of words and a form of choreography to take them neatly over the 26th deadline.
I don't think the Ulster Unionist Party should judge the DUP by its standards. That may be what it has done in the past, jumped in far too quickly, only to get its fingers burnt, to find Florida gun running, to find Stormont-Gate, to find Castlereagh, to find all of that. The DUP is not going to make that foolish mistake. Sinn Féin has all the work to do, and they've done very, very little.
All right, so let me just bring Seamus close in quickly. What's your betting on a deal on the 26th?
Well, I think to a large degree we live in Alice in Wonderland, where no means yes and yes means no. And the 26th of March will come, and there will be those of us who will be scratching our heads on the 27th to find out whether or not a deal has been done, such as the fudge, such as the sticking plaster that will be brought out and stuck over that particular date. Yes, the people have voted for progress, But progress means different things to different people with our electorate in Northern Ireland, as has been demonstrated on too many occasions. Ultimately, there will be a deal, but I do not believe that it is sustainable into the long term until we get maturity of politics in Northern Ireland, where people can meet after an election and decide this is the form of government into which they want to go, and those who don't want to participate will be in an opposition.
But that's not going to happen this time.
It's not going to happen. That's why I say
next time.
That's why I say this is not sustainable. But long term, I think we've got to move towards that.
All right,
and that's what the people are asking for.
All right, thank you, gentlemen. Let's go to our statistics engine and Mark.
Noel, thanks very much. The difficulty, of course, for us over here is that we don't have any numbers to crunch at this stage. What I can tell you there, I'm just seeing, is that the Alliance Party in South Belfast are saying they're confident of taking that seat for Anna Lowe, and in fact suggesting they might not be scrabbling around for the 6th seat at all. They might do rather better than that. We'll see, of course, when we see the first preference votes. One of the fascinating things to look out for in this is how the battle rages within unionism and within nationalism, and we've got some nice pictures here that illustrate that very well, and I'm going to ask Mark and Sydney to talk us through it. This is basically a little historical lesson, if you like. We go back to the general election, Mark, of May '97, where Tony Blair romped home for the first time. You can see there that the Ulster Unionists basically had 2.5 times the DUP vote.
Yeah, I mean, obviously at this particular point, the Ulster Unionists very much the dominant force. They were the deal makers in the Northern Ireland Assembly elections, which I think we'll see coming on in '98. Now, the DUP was sceptical about the agreement. They closed the gap there, but the Ulster Unionists still stayed ahead. If we move on then to the general election of, I think that's 2001, the Ulster Unionists still maintaining their lead there, but the DUP on the rise. But here's where you get the crossover. The Assembly election of November 2003 was where the DUP effectively took over in terms of the share of the vote, and then they also dealt a blow immediately afterwards with the defections they got from the Ulster Unionists.
And it widens again there.
Here in the general election, this is you know, the wipeout when I think Lady Sylvia Herman said even one is a victory, but nobody else apart from her agreed with it, because we had this mass ranks of the DUP return to Westminster.
A complete change of fortunes, because there you can see that basically the DUP have got double the Ulster Unionist vote, and that's it, Sydney. That's the way it looks over a period of, what, 8 years?
Yes, and the gap does appear still to be widening, and that's the question for the electorate today. Really, what we will see at the end of this election, is the gap still widening, or will it be checked in any form? Anything we've heard so far would be the DUP probably trying to pick off seats and trying to widen that gap even further.
Well, it'll be fascinating to see, and we'll bring you those results before anyone else, but we're not expecting first preference votes to be available for a little bit of time yet. This is the battle, Mark, within nationalism, the SDLP against Sinn Féin, back to that general election of May '97, and we can see there that the SDLP comfortably ahead of Sinn Féin.
Yeah, the heyday of John Hume. He was the man credited by the broader nationalist community as bringing peace, and he was still there holding that lead in the Assembly elections of '98, although there was some support there for Sinn Féin and its peace strategy. And
there's the crossover.
Is the crossover in the general election, June 2001, where the SDLP lost their dominant position. Sinn Féin.
It was very, very close, it has to be said.
It was close, yeah, and basically it's a similar trend, but with slightly less marked variation, if you like. In November 2003, Sinn Féin clearly establishing their dominance there as the main nationalist party. The question is, will the SDLP be able to be more resilient in the future and stop this trend?
Gap of 6.5% at the last Assembly election in terms of share of the first preference vote. There's the final figure that we have,
May 2005. That's where they had a few unlikely victories, such as South Belfast, and where they would have seen it as them arresting that trend. So we will be watching carefully to see what happens now.
And there's the overall picture. It's not unlike the picture within unionism, Sydney. It's not identical, but it's similar.
Except in this case, that the rise of Sinn Féin seems to have been flattening, and the gap between SDLP and Sinn Féin seems to have levelled off. And say SDLP have been putting in work to try to ensure that doesn't happen. And interestingly, tactically, Sinn Féin seems to be targeting seats. And say if you were to extend the graph of Sinn Féin support, it's fairly flat. It could go through 25%. If it's higher than that this time, then in a sense you're back to a widening gap situation. If it's lower, it's closing.
And probably that sort of checking of the rise explains why most commentators are expecting perhaps Sinn Féin to put on some strength in this election, but not really to maybe make the same kind of advance as the DUP. Sinn Féin have certain target seats. They're likely to take Lagan Valley, for instance, off the SDLP, but it might not be so dramatic as on the Unionist side.
Yeah, OK. Just to remind people that we've got unrivaled services in terms of bringing you results on television, radio and online. But for the first time in any UK election, you can also get all of the highlights sent to your own personal mobile phone. All you have to do is text the word election to 81222. And from about 2 o'clock today, we hope we'll be sending you regular updates of the winners, the losers and the state of the party. So text the word election to 81222 and it couldn't be simpler. Noel.
Excellent, thank you very much indeed. Let's go to Ballymena. Tara Mills is there to tell us about the Mid-Ulster count. Tara.
Well, Noel, we're waiting the imminent arrival of Martin McGuinness. We're told that he left Derry at 12 o'clock, so he should be here very shortly. But in the meantime, I'll just give you a picture of the Mid-Ulster constituency. 3 Sinn Féin, 1 SDLP, 1 DUP, 1 Ulster Unionist. That's the picture. It's 2/3 Nationalist, 1/3 Unionist. And there's not really any change expected, although the potential thorn in the side for Sinn Féin is Brendan McLaughlin. He's the Republican Sinn Féin candidate standing on an anti-policing ticket. But a couple of Sinn Féin sources I've spoken to this morning have been looking at the counts, looking at the papers, and don't think that that he has polled particularly well and that he is a big threat to their 3 seats. On the Unionist side, the UK Unionist Party's Walter Miller was the potential threat to the DUP's vote. Did he pick up some of the dissenting voices here in Mid-Ulster for this constituency? He actually told me himself this morning he doesn't think that he's done it. He says he thinks people have voted on traditional party lines.
OK, Tara, thank you very much indeed. Gordon Adair awaits us in Banbridge at the upper band count. Gordon?
Noel, I think before today everybody thought that here in Upper Ban it was going to be very much a case of the battle within unionism, but it's actually a little more complicated than that. Yes, there is that battle within unionism. At the moment we have 2 Ulster Unionist and 2 DUP representatives from this area, and there is a possibility that the DUP could sneak a 3rd seat at the expense of the Ulster Unionists. But chatting to Sinn Féin party workers this morning, they're also quite bullish about the prospect of them getting a 2nd seat at the expense of the Ulster Unionists. They point out that last time round they had almost 1.5 quotas, and they believe that they've increased the percentage of their vote this time round. So it'll be an interesting day, or a couple of days certainly, here in the Upper Ban.
Gordon, thank you very much indeed. We're going to West Tyrone now. The count is in Omagh. Maggie Taggart is there. Hello, Maggie.
Hello, I'm in West Tyrone at the Omagh Leisure Centre, and here has been billed the Battle of the Doctors, because we're talking about a battle between Dr. Kieran Deaney, the GP independent who stood and had a landslide victory in the last Assembly election, and Dr. Joe Deehan of the SDLP. Now, it seems here that the DUP and Sinn Féin have polled very strongly. Now, that could cause a number of repercussions. SDLP are saying that their party vote may be down, but they're fairly confident of Dr. Joe Deehan getting in. On the other hand, it seems that Dr. Deaney's vote is slightly down, so a wee bit disappointing there, but he didn't have the strong basis for polling last time, which was to try to keep an acute hospital in Omagh. The Sinn Féin contingent are saying they have 2 they had 2 sitting MLAs, and they're hopeful of a 3rd. They're still hopeful of that because they think they've worked that strategic vote very well. The DUP say they've polled very strongly, and that could mean trouble for Derek Hussey of the UUP. It could be that DUP get 2 candidates in instead of their current 1.
OK, Maggie, thank you very much indeed. We'll go to South Antrim now. David Ford, the Alliance leader, waits us there. Mr. Ford, a very good afternoon to you. It was a tight enough battle last time. What's it looking like this time for you?
Well, it looks somewhat less tight this time. If you've seen down below, we haven't yet got to the stage of doing any formal count, but we've got some reasonably accurate tallies. It certainly appears that the DUP have gained from the Ulster Unionists, Sinn Féin have gained from the SDLP, and Alliance at the moment appears to be making modest gains from both of them. OK, so any change are you predicting, or will it still be 2 DUP, 2 UUP, 1 SDLP and your good self? No, it certainly will not be 1 SDLP. It looks very much as if Mitchell McLaughlin has won the seat. At the moment, I would think it's more likely from the SDLP than from me. There's also a chance, depending upon the balance and the transfers later in the day, that the DUP could take 3-1 against the Ulster Unionists.
OK, what's the mood like at the count? Is it flat like the campaign was?
Well, I don't know why you journalists think the campaign was flat. Those who were actually out on the doorsteps and in the shopping centres meeting real people as opposed to talking to other journalists quite enjoyed it, Noel.
We meet real people occasionally too, you know.
Yeah, well, you see, the advantage of being in the Alliance Party is the BBC doesn't put you on television so often, so you get the chance to go out and speak to real people. And real people were warming to what we were saying. They were warming to the message about a shared future. They were warming to the need to have real, genuine partnership. And that's why my vote is up here. That's why Sean Neeson's vote is up in the other half of the hall with Stuart Dixon with him in East Antrim. That's why I understand from my colleagues our votes up in places like North Down and South Belfast. And I think it's going to be a good day for the Alliance Party.
And indeed, in South Belfast and Alloa, that would be quite a cap for you, wouldn't it?
Well, we have always said that building a pluralist society is more than just orange-green politics. I have every hope that today Anna Lowe will make that really start to happen.
So you had,
I think that would. Sorry?
So, you must have been, perhaps you've been overbuoyed by the Telegraph poll, which saw the Alliance vote up to 9%. That must have given you a few very happy days.
No, we're an entirely realistic party. We're well aware of the fact that opinion polls tend to overrepresent Alliance. In more or less every poll that's been taken, we've seen that. But when the poll last time gave us 5% and we got 3.5% in the actual election, and the poll this time says 9%, we know that there's a trend happening, and that was consistent with what we were hearing on the doorsteps. And I think it's being borne out in ballot boxes in most of our key constituencies from what I've already heard. I've no doubt as we hear later in the day, we'll see it on a wider scale.
David, just before I say goodbye to your old chum, Seamus Close, is in studio. Perhaps you have a message for David,
Best
Seamus.
luck, David. How's it going? What's the numbers? Looking good?
Well, we haven't got the numbers yet. We've only just finished the count, and the tally merchants are operating on the laptop down below us as we speak. But certainly it looks to me as if our vote is probably up a couple of percent, and that would be extremely good news.
Best of luck.
It's the Alliance Old Comrades Association at work here in the studio.
No, he's the Old Comrades Association. I'm still active on the ground here.
Just back to studio quickly. A quick word about vote management, Brad. I mean, that's clearly already becoming a big issue today.
Yes, I mean, one of the interesting things is that the DUP have really tried hard this time. And I sense a certain disappointment listening to Nigel Dodds because he did a great job in North Belfast. If you look at the way the posters are distributed, Dodds, Humphreys, McCausland, Humphreys, Dodds. But the voters haven't carried out their instructions, according to Nigel Dodds, because they haven't been used to doing it. Usually the DUP would just simply say, vote 1, 2, 3 DUP. Yeah. On the other hand, Sinn Féin have been educating their voters for 20 years, and they really did a remarkable job in West Belfast in 2003. People are talking about them trying to get 5 seats. I mean, that is almost statistically impossible. But they got 4 the last time, which is pretty nearly impossible.
Coming to lunchtime. Alex, vote management, Ulster Unionists, doesn't really matter to them anymore, does it?
Well, it matters. I think, South Belfast is an interesting example. The DUP, who went in for very strict vote management, seem to not have got the second seat. The Ulster Unionist Party, who didn't do any, have lost one.
We're disappearing for the news. We'll be back on BBC One at 1:30. Remember, BBC Radio Ulster and our online services will be continuing coverage throughout.